It is the Resistance Report for March 6th, 2017. Good evening. I want to talk a little bit about the rule of law, in particular as it applies to three items that have dominated the news today and over the last several days. Number one is the new travel ban that the White House signed today. The second is Trump's rant on Saturday. And the third is the continuing saga of Jeff Sessions. And then I'll take your questions. The purpose of the Resistance Report is to bring together strands of news to show larger patterns. And that's what we're doing tonight with regard to the rule of law, which says essentially that we are a nation governed by laws, but not by individuals. That the arbitrary whims of presidents or dictators or any individual person are illegitimate in a democracy. Now consider the travel ban that was reinstituted, or at least redesigned today. It wasn't reinstituted. This is a new travel ban. The attempt by Trump, White House, is to come up with a travel ban that will not be met by the courts, as was the last one, as constitutionally suspect. The new travel ban, instead of barring citizens from 7 predominantly Muslim countries, narrows it down to 6 predominantly Muslim countries. It also exempts people who have a legal right to travel to the United States, green card holders and people with valid visas. And it's not for quite as long a period of time with regard to refugees. But here's the problem. It is still a ban based on religion. It is based on the fact that these 6 nations are predominantly Muslim nations. And it's not surprising, because that's the way Trump was elected. He said over and over again that he wanted a Muslim travel ban. And his aide at the time, Rudy Giuliani, repeated that and said that Trump had approached him and said, how can I get a Muslim travel ban that passes constitutional and legal muster? And so this latest attempt by the White House to come up with a travel ban is yet another attempt to skirt the constitutional prohibition on the establishment of a religion. It may be a slightly better travel ban in terms of slightly more precisely targeted, but it is still directed at Muslims. Now, is there a valid national security issue here? Maybe that Muslim travel ban could conceivably pass muster if there was a major reason to conclude that these 6 nations posed an unreasonable risk of terrorism. But there has been, up until now, in terms of the number of terrorist attacks in the United States by citizens coming from these 6 nations, there have been 0. Can I repeat that? 0 terrorist attacks in the United States from citizens of any one of these 6 nations. Your chance of being killed in a terrorist attack in the United States by a citizen from one of these 6 nations is less than your chance of being struck by lightning and killed. In other words, there is no connection to national security. Given that we have a First Amendment stricture on any kind of establishment of religion or any kind of administrative or executive or legal initiative that singles out a certain religion, then the courts have no choice but to knock this down. And we all have I think, a duty to cheer the courts on and to be shocked and appalled by what the Trump administration continues to want to try to do. It's just another aspect of trying to use xenophobia and racism as a means of cutting us off from each other. It is a violation of the rule of law, as was Trump's rant on Saturday. Now, as you know, certainly you know by now, Trump, in a series of tweets, ending with the conclusion that Barack Obama, Trump's predecessor as president, was sick or bad, alleged that Obama had bugged the Trump Tower, had bugged and put a tap on Trump's phones with no verification, no evidence. Now, there is a temptation to try to normalize this kind of behavior. This is not normal. There are only 3 possible reasons that Trump did this. All of these possible reasons are unsettling at the least. In fact, in many ways, any reason you can come up with, any of these 3, is terrifying. The first is that Trump is a paranoid, that he is someone who has delusions and is finding conspiracies and plots everywhere and is willing to put the entire prestige of the presidency behind wild assertions. Based upon what? Based upon something that he might have read in Breitbart News, that in turn was based on a claim of a right-wing talk radio host, based on nothing? Putting the entire prestige of the office, putting the entire bully pulpit of the presidency on the line, accusing his predecessor of a nefarious act? Well, that does suggest a severe mental problem. The alternative B, if you wish, that's alternative A. Alternative B is maybe Trump's line was bugged. Now, a president has no authority to install a wiretap. So if there was a wiretap on Trump's line, it must have come from the Justice Department seeking through court order, and you have to go through the courts. You either go through a regular court and you make a case that there is probable cause to believe a very serious crime was committed. That's how you get a warrant for a wiretap. Or you go to an international surveillance court, a special secret court, and you make the case that there is a high probability that somebody has been compromised and is a foreign agent. That's the only way you can actually get a tap that has any utility. And either of those possibilities, if in fact a major crime was committed and there's a high probability it was committed by Donald Trump, or that he is, with a high probability, a foreign agent, those possibilities themselves are pretty terrifying. Now, is there any other possible reason why Trump might have gone on his rant Saturday morning other than delusional paranoia, or that there actually was a legal tap on his phone because of the high probability that he had been engaged in criminal activity or was a foreign agent? Yes, there is a third possibility, and that was Trump was engaging in another one of his giant diversions, attempts to divert public opinion, divert attention away from what, in this case, Jeff Sessions, and the imbroglio last week about his attorney general lying under oath to the Senate. Well, if that was Trump's motive, in other words, if Donald Trump is willing to do something like that, that is, cast a serious claim, an accusation against his predecessor, former president of the United States, on the basis of no evidence, simply to divert attention from what trouble his attorney general was in, that itself is alarming. That suggests that Donald Trump will do anything to stay in office. In fact, maybe, it's a short step from that, but maybe this is all in Donald Trump's book, a design to discredit the press, discredit the intelligence agencies, discredit Barack Obama, discredit anybody who has any possible interest in telling the truth about him, so that when the truth does come out, he can say those sources are not credible. Now, that's possible, but if Donald Trump were that kind of person, that kind of president, if he were doing that appalling abuse of his authority, well, that seems to me to be almost as bad, if not as bad, as him being a delusional paranoid or being guilty of a major, serious crime, or being a foreign agent, justifying a tap on his phone. Do you get my point? Any way you look at this, this is a serious problem. This is not normal. It's not, in fact, not only is it abnormal, this is the kind of person, regardless of which of these explanations you think is true, this is the kind of person who should not have his hands close to, or be close to, the nuclear codes that could cause another world war, if not a planetary catastrophe, the end of the world. For Democrats to raise any criticism of Donald Trump on the basis of what he did Saturday risks sounding like partisanship, kind of a new, more extreme form of partisanship, but partisanship just the same. The only way that the public can know how appalling this is if Republicans stand up, leading Republicans. And I'm talking about not only current Republican senators and leaders in the House, but also former Republican leaders. How about George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush? They ought to be speaking out and saying, this is not presidential, this is dangerous behavior. They have a stake in public confidence in the president. They also have a stake in a sane presidency. So do all Republicans. And what about Jeff Sessions? Jeff Sessions ought to resign. He's come up with no excuse for lying under oath to the committee, the Senate Judiciary Committee, charged with recommending a confirmation, his confirmation as Attorney General. He is now the highest law enforcement officer in the United States. He is the #1 law enforcement officer in the United States, and he committed perjury. He lied under oath. That is a serious offense. His excuses don't wash. He said, well, he met with the Russian ambassador because he had Armed Services Committee business. Rubbish. No other member of the Armed Services Committee met with the Russian ambassador. He was meeting with the Russian ambassador because Jeff Sessions was a key member of the Trump campaign. And he was meeting with the Russian ambassador having to do with something to do with the Trump campaign. If he had nothing to hide, why did he hide it? If he had nothing to hide, why didn't he say to the committee, I did meet with the Russian ambassador, but it wasn't on campaign business, it was on Senate business. If he had nothing to hide, he would have been open about it. It's like others around Trump. Flynn, who lied and then hid the lie. When I'm talking about the rule of law, I am talking about a set of common agreements about how our government will function, about the responsibilities of public officials, starting with the president, in their positions of public trust. And what we have repeatedly out of the Trump White House and Donald Trump himself is a violation and an abuse of public trust. What can you do? Well, you can do several things. Number one, you can urge your state attorney general to fight the new travel ban, this new incarnation of the travel ban, as a violation of the First Amendment. You can also ask your state attorney general to even sue the Justice Department on the basis that your state and the interests of your state cannot possibly be protected by somebody who violates his oath of office and violates even his senatorial oath and violates the oath that he took in terms of even testifying before the Senate. There are other things you can do as well. I have recommended to you on several occasions that you get together with others, with neighbors, with friends, that you consult with indivisibleguide.com. That is a very good guide to how groups of people can come together and influence members of Congress, and that you do call your members of Congress. And if the phone lines are busy, keep on calling and register your concern. Tell them that on every one of the issues that we've been talking about with regard to this new version of the travel ban, it is unconstitutional. With regard to Trump's raves, that he ought to be, either through the 25th Amendment or through the impeachment process, no longer trusted with his office. Or number three, with regard to Jeff Sessions, or I should say, and number three, Jeff Sessions, he should resign as Attorney General. And finally, what you can do with your indivisible group or with others is work to make sure that in 2018 we have a Congress that will stand up to Donald Trump, if he's still there. Now, I don't mean it has to be a Democratic Congress. I am not that kind of partisan. If we have Republicans who are willing to stand up to Donald Trump, great. I'll support them, but they have to stand up to this tyranny. So you need to get ready for the next election. You need to organize and you need to mobilize. And now I'm going to take your questions. Larry Hill, they sent Martha Stewart to jail for a year for perjury. How is Sessions getting a pass? Larry, it's all politics. Sessions has not yet got a pass. I don't think the Senate has decided exactly what to do. The Justice Department also has to make a decision. Now, obviously, Sessions is an Attorney General, the Attorney General. He has got to recuse himself from any decision by the Justice Department about whether to pursue perjury charges. That should be the acting or the Deputy Attorney General acting independently. But the Senate needs to recommend this. And you need to have, in a Senate that has 52 Republicans and 48 Democrats, there has got to be at least a majority of Republicans who are going to go along. Or you have to have enough Republicans, I should say, to go along with this. And if you get a majority, so much the better. Dave Jewett, the Dow Jones is the highest ever. Is this a reflection of the fox in the chicken coop? David, the only reason that the Dow Jones is high is because corporate profits are high. And the reason corporate profits are high and the Dow Jones is high is because of the expectation of even higher profits in the future coming from a major corporate tax cut and also the kind of regulatory so-called relief that Donald Trump and the Republicans are promising. That may yield even higher corporate profits, but it doesn't mean a higher standard of living for Americans if we, along the way, get rid of environmental protections and health and safety regulations and investor protections and labor protections. And by the way, if those major corporate tax cuts mean that Americans no longer have public services that they need and rely on, then we are worse off. Gerald Kahn, what do you think of the House of Representatives, I assume you're talking about, new plan unveiled this afternoon to replace the Affordable Care Act? Gerald, the little I've seen of it, it contains tax credits and tax deductions for individuals, but there are no cost estimates at all. And also, there are no estimates in that plan of how many people will lose the health coverage they now have under the Affordable Care Act. So this is irrelevant. It is unimportant. It is not even a news story. All they did is come out with a set of assertions about what their replacement plan would be, but you need to have the Congressional Budget Office and other independent third-party groups look at the plan and come up with some valid estimates of cost and coverage. By the way, Gerald, the biggest news today on the Hill concerning the Affordable Care Act did not come out of the House. It came out of the Senate. And that was 4 Republican senators, courageous Republican senators, who went on the record in a letter to Mitch McConnell saying that they would not sign off on any repeal of the Affordable Care Act that did not protect people in their state who got extended Medicaid protection under the Affordable Care Act. This is a courageous act on the part of these 4 senators. They are representing their people, not the party. I wish more senators in the Republican Party and even in the Democratic Party on occasion represented their constituents instead of their party. Mario Taylor, what are the chances that Comey will be fired and replaced by a Sessions-like crony? Mario, I assume you're talking about the fact that James Comey said over the weekend that he wanted the Justice Department to repudiate Trump's charge that Barack Obama had somehow wiretapped Trump during the campaign. Comey said that there was no basis for that, and the Justice Department should come out with a statement that there is no basis for that, in effect calling the president a liar. Trump, apparently, according to one of his spokespeople today, doesn't agree with Comey, not surprisingly. Does this mean that Comey is eventually fired? Could be. I lived through, and some of you watching this afternoon lived through Richard Nixon and his firing of Archibald Cox as the special prosecutor, and then Elliot Richardson, do you remember, as Richard Nixon's Attorney General. He resigned over that. Presidents have been known to exercise their authority in getting rid of people who could embarrass them or lead ultimately to impeachment. But of course, you know what happened to Richard Nixon. Yvonne Goolagong, do taxpayers have to pay for Secret Service protection for Donald and Eric Trump, even when they travel for family business stuff? Is this fair? Well, according to regulations right now, Yvonne, yes, taxpayers have got to pay, but it is not fair. The Trump Organization should be reimbursing taxpayers, particularly for the business trips of Donald Trump's sons that are going to redound to the benefit of Donald Trump personally. There's no reason that you or I should be subsidizing the Donald Trump business. Make your views known about this. Make a ruckus about this. 2 more questions. Daisy Ann, is there anything that can be done to prohibit the administration from making executive orders until it can be determined conclusively that they've not been working with another foreign government illegally? Daisy Ann, there is nothing that can stop Donald Trump from using the authority of the presidency to the fullest, unless he is impeached or unless the 25th Amendment is invoked and he is sent packing because he's mentally incompetent. Last question. Karen Ward, wouldn't it be smarter for the media to give less attention to what 45, that is Donald Trump, says on Twitter and more to Sessions and the Russia connection? How do we navigate these mechanisms of distraction? Karen, it's critically important that the media not be played by Donald Trump, as the media has been played. The media was played by Trump during the election because Trump is so unpredictable and entertaining in his unpredictable ways. A lot of people just love to watch him and see what he's going to do next. It's a great national sporting adventure. Donald Trump, because he is so entertaining and interesting, is taking more and more mind share. Do you know that expression, mind share? He's taking up more and more space in our brains, in your brain, in my brain. That's what he wants. The trouble is the media is playing along with him. The media is focusing, for example, right now on Trump's craziness over the weekend instead of on Sessions and on the Russian connection. What the media has got to do is to focus on the bigger picture, to continue to focus in ways that enable people to see how everything is connected to everything else. That, in a very tiny way, is what we're doing here. Donald Trump is a master at playing the media, but he doesn't have to play you. Again, the only way we, you and I, and everyone else can deal with this catastrophe called Donald Trump, and I use the word catastrophe absolutely literally. He is a catastrophe for this nation, is to mobilize and organize against him. Now, it begins right now, calling your members of Congress, being clear, appearing at the next town meetings when there's another recess, as you did, many of you, at the last recess. It means demonstrating and writing petitions, of course, but if you don't connect it to actual political action, it has no significance. It's got to be political strategy. And you have got to be an active participant also in the 2018 midterm elections, which are beginning right now, because it's right now that decisions are being made about who in the primaries is going to go up against the person who is now representing you in your district or in the Senate. You can be an active player in all this. You must be. Many of you have already decided that you are becoming more political than you ever have been in your lives. And that is commendable. It is appropriate. It is what you must do, what we all must do. That's the end of tonight's Resistance Report. I'll see you tomorrow.